Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. I am your host, as always, Ben Thomas. You know, one of my favorite conversations and topics in the industry is recruiting, retention, hiring, bringing new blood into the industry. It's always a conversation that continues to drive our industry forward as we see new generations, new talent, people from different industries coming in with different opinions. And it's always a conversation worth having. And I wanted to have this conversation this week with somebody who really has a lot of different perspectives, not only as somebody who kind of came from outside the industry, but as somebody who's some new blood and has some ideas in the industry. Also somebody who's recently received the Commercial Integrator 40 Under 40 Award. So said, hey, this is a great time to bring on this guest, and that's Andie Mace. Andie, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk about all things AV and UC, all the acronyms.
All of it. Let's stick more acronyms in there. I will say that's always the funny thing when people come in, they're trying to learn what everything means and all the trade shows and all the channel structure. And you've been in the industry for now, I think about 5 or 6 years, and you know all of them. So you're good now.
Oh yeah, it was a fire hose of information. I had to get up to speed fast.
Well, Andie, let's start there. I know that you know a lot of people in our audience probably do know who you are, especially with the recognition from the CI 40 Under 40 this year. But there might be some folks who don't, so would love to give you the chance to introduce yourself and tell just a little bit about your story and how you found your way to the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So I currently work as a product marketing manager at HP. Previously was at Poly, but as I'm sure a lot of you will know, Poly a couple years ago was acquired by HP, which has been a really exciting change to be able to kind of sit front row to. But yeah, prior to that, I had been at Poly for a few years, and I kind of actually made my way into this industry. It wasn't super purposeful, to be honest. I've always been interested in tech. I get that from my mom. I think she really likes gadgets. And so therefore I like gadgets. But it wasn't really ever something that I had thought about. I, prior to Poly, was at a company that I just wasn't sure was where I wanted to be for long-term growth, but was kind of feeling it out when someone reached out to me from Poly and let me know about this open role. And I thought, you know, these products are really cool. I was prior to that working on software, and I think going from software to working on actual hardware is like really exciting because it's something you can actually touch and hold and interact with on a daily basis. So I thought, knowing very little about AV and the unified communications industry, there we go. We'll start with a non-acronym. I just kind of took the jump because the technology looked cool. The team seemed great. And that's kind of how I made my way into this industry.
Well, I love that your journey sort of is one that's a little bit different from a lot of folks in the industry. So a lot of times you'll hear people that came in from a product design or engineering standpoint or a sales side. You kind of came in from the marketing side of the industry, which is one of the places kind of uniquely that our industry continues to evolve pretty dramatically, right? Historically, we're a world of exclusively white papers and, you know, programmatic advertising and all these different things. And the marketing world has evolved so uniquely. And one of the ways that you get to kind of speak into the conversation and help push the industry is through that marketing side. What are some of the ways that you've sort of seen, even in your time in the industry so far, you've seen sort of that shift happen, especially as we start to lean into things like thought leadership, digitization, you know, the quick social clips, things like that?
So I came into the industry from a time perspective right after COVID. So there was already a lot going on in terms of like things that were changing just in our society at large. And I think a lot of that, because of the nature of COVID and remote work, a lot of that change was happening within this industry. So it was really interesting to be able to see that as it was happening. And we've all seen this change to a much bigger focus on like employee satisfaction and making sure that our employees are really kind of have what they need to be productive, whether that's working at home and having the technology they need at home, or coming to the office being, you know, hybrid, having some days in the office, having the technology in the office that will actually make it worthwhile for them to come into the office. That's a big thing that we've seen kind of pick up as well. But overall, I think the change has been a lot more towards how can we really enable our employees to be productive and to feel good about the work that they're doing. And I think that's one of the things that after joining the industry, I really latched onto, was this idea that the technology that we're creating can make such a difference in people's lives, because remote work is a thing, hybrid work is a thing, and it's really affected the way that we are able to connect and to feel connected. And like that feeling of being connected is literally, it's a basic human need. It's in our hierarchy of needs, right? Yeah. So it's something that we need. And I think, just with the shift from COVID, we've had a lot more focus on how the things that we're creating can help drive that connection a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and one of the conversations, even in the last handful of years at the InfoComs and the ISEs of the world, is our industry needs to pivot more towards being a problem solving and solutions industry instead of a products industry, right? Because we've got, like I said, all the great engineering minds and the product design and development. We're always innovating from a product standpoint, but sometimes we can lose sight as an industry, not only of the end users and the problems that we solve, but even, like you mentioned, the employees and the people inside the industry that aren't always in that world. And it's so cool to, I think, see the different perspectives of people as they kind of find their way into the industry, whether it be, through the marketing side like you or the engineering side, because, the world of technology, especially driven through things like B2C technologies, whether it be, your iPhone sort of all in one or great products that you guys make over at HP, things like that. The world's always evolving. So that product side is always going to be there. But understanding, hey, when we're talking to our audiences, when we're talking to our employees, when we're educating people about capabilities and products and services, we have to actually focus on that problem solving side of things, because at the end of the day, technologies in a lot of cases are very, very similar. I'm curious, your thoughts on, how you kind of position that and maybe bring in some of that expertise to say, hey, we're coming in from a technology world, but we've got to be able to talk to these people like we're solving their problems, like we're connecting them with other people. Have you been able to do that?
I love this question because I think that while obviously we are in the technology industry and we're creating technology products, which is more on the science side, when we get into how people communicate, it's very much an art. And I think that's really where we're able to differentiate on any of the products that we're creating, is how well do we know that art? Especially when you get to thinking about things like camera framing and what types of AI innovations we have that can help create the best conversation and help foster relationships. Like, I think it's that expertise that really comes in and kind of differentiates one piece of technology from the other. Because you're right, at the end of the day, like, hardware is hardware. And to be honest, like, a lot of us in the industry use similar hardware components, right? Because hardware is hardware. There's only so much of it, but it's what we do with the hardware, the experiences that we add on to the hardware, that I think really start to differentiate. And being able to know, as someone who's in this industry, a lot about how we communicate and about the nuances of that communication, that art side of things, I think that's so important, whether you're in marketing, whether you're in product design and engineering. Like, that kind of needs to be where we start, right? Because that's the end user experience that they're getting. That's all that they know. They don't really know the hardware as much. They know the experience and what it's doing for them and how it's helping them to foster this relationship and communication.
Yeah. Well, and what I will say too, and I know a lot of the folks over at HP probably very well, you guys do a great job of sort of adopting that messaging and solving those problems, not only just kind of on the B2B side, but also on the B2C brand kind of awareness side as well. But I'm curious, especially as you see different folks and stakeholders across different companies and conversations and technologies, have you seen sort of a pushback, or seen people kind of reject that approach where, instead of, hey, we want to talk about the customer and we want to talk about the buyer and talk about how technology empowers them? Have you seen maybe the other side of the token where people say, no, we only want to talk about our technology, we're not really interested in the larger conversation, or maybe is there sort of some crossover there?
I've definitely seen some pushback on it. I don't know that it's as much of pushback in the sense of, oh, we only want to talk about the product, but more so, I think the idea that what we're doing has such an impact on like human emotion feels kind of quote unquote woo woo for people. We're not
it's
all
intimidating at best.
Yeah, and I think people can have a hard time like seeing the connection, just because I think for a long time in this industry and kind of in our society, like we were not like it was very taboo to talk about being connected or feeling lonely or really just like our emotions at large. And so I think that there is definitely pushback to now for now us saying like, oh, these things do really impact like how we feel. They impact our productivity, which productivity I think is a little bit more of an acceptable term. But when you think about what goes into being productive, like you have to feel good to be productive. You have to feel happy. You have to feel like you're working towards something that you care about and that the people that you're working with hear you and understand you. And if you don't have those things, it's really going to impact your, I'm going to say it, mental health. I know that's another scary term, a very taboo term. And those things in turn impact your productivity. So I think the pushback I get is people not being able to make that connection to kind of business outcomes immediately, from like that emotional well-being side of things. And so we have to kind of help make that connection, I think, to cross that bridge.
Yeah, well, I think that may even be a great topic of conversation for another episode, because there's a lot to unpack there, right? Especially from a productivity, even stuff like, mood lighting and setting and working environment and natural light. There's so many different conversations to have there that helps empower that world of technology and mental wellness and mental fitness and things like that. But what's interesting, and I've seen this kind of as the shift has happened, as we have different generations sort of age into our industry, that conversation is actually very, very important to newcomers to our industry, right? It's one of the recruiting tools. It's one of the conversations that we have to actually have, not only as manufacturers and service providers, but as employers. How have you seen that? And I know, like I said, you guys have done a great job of this over at the HP and Poly side of things. How have you seen sort of that affinity for that mental wellness, that mental fitness, mental health, things like that, be part of that culture building and part of that recruiting and even hiring process inside of our industry?
I mean,
it's a big question.
Yeah. Certainly people know it's a thing. And I think that there's a lot of teams that do it really well. Like I would say my team, for example, does that really well. I do think there probably needs to be, I think it's hard again, because going back to this, maybe some older generations don't necessarily make the connection between emotional well-being and productivity and thus business outcome. I think sometimes we can hear people talking about that, but not be sure if they really mean it. So I think the more we see like managers really coming in and saying, advocating for this, advocating for setting boundaries, making sure you take time off, making sure that you have the right equipment at home that makes you feel productive, giving you what you need to work well. I think when we really see more managers starting to adopt that, like it becomes really impactful. And I'm definitely seeing that more. But it's less, I think, impactful to this generation to just hear a company say that, on their sort of like recruitment page, or to hear an executive talking about that, because at the end of the day, like it comes down to your individual managers. A lot of that stuff does. You can have a great company that has they talk about that stuff and they talk about it well, and they say that it's really a value, but that can all kind of fall apart if it's not the individual managers and individuals teams throughout the companies who are really implementing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad we're having this conversation, because ironically enough, it's one of the reasons that helped kind of propel you to the 40 under 40 moniker. Not only conversations about culture, wellness, how technology can empower that, but also just from an innovation standpoint, some of the work that you've been doing, not only on the business side of things, but on the community side of things. So I want to ask, and before we do that, shout out to Dan Farisi and the Commercial Integrator crew. Love the incredible work that you guys are doing. Thanks for putting together the 40 under 40 list every year. It's a great resource for the community. But Andie, you talk about 40 under 40. I mean, what does it feel like to be recognized, publicly for a lot of the work that you've definitely been doing behind the scenes?
It is really special. And I think the reason that it means the most to me is because I know that I am young in this industry and I'm one of the younger people on that list. And I think I have felt just in my career, there's a lot of challenges as being someone who's young and coming in with these new ideas that maybe shake things up a little bit, to where from the way things have been, it's a challenge. And sometimes, you run into situations where people don't listen to you, or they don't think that that's the way that we should be doing things. And, maybe sometimes they're right. I'm not trying to claim that I'm always right. Certainly I'm not. I'm wrong often. We all are. But being able to get this recognition that kind of says, like, you're doing something right in this industry, and you're doing something that people are seeing and people care about. Like, as someone who is young and up and coming in this industry, that is so meaningful and kind of something that propels me personally to keep kind of fighting the good fight, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one of the reasons I love kind of the moniker, the awards every year, is because it feels like oftentimes, the younger folks in the industry, the people who have less experience, are oftentimes the ones who, because of maybe junior positions or length of time at a company, don't get to go to the infocoms. They don't get to go to the networking events. They don't get to go to ISE and things like that. So they're not always afforded the same opportunities from a not only a travel standpoint, but just a networking standpoint, right? And I think it's such a great way for not only people to say, to kind of get a finger pointed to them and says, hey, I want to spotlight this person, but it also allows them to see that there's other people like them in the industry, right? I remember when I had the opportunity to be on that list, it was incredible to see other people who had similar ideas that I did that I had never met, right? And I'd like to think I'm pretty well connected. I get to go to the shows and stuff every year, but there were people that I had never even heard of, and positions I didn't even know exist. Some companies I didn't even know exist, right? It's so cool to see how people of different generations are empowering the industry, whether that's from a startup business standpoint, whether that's from a marketing initiative standpoint, whether that's from a mental health advocacy standpoint. I think it's so important to our industry, and seeing folks like that, kind of come in. I do want to ask, though, I mean, I think obviously we talk a lot about, we ask people how they kind of found their way into the industry, but I want to ask you, especially through the lens of being recognized for 40 under 40 and things like that, what has kept you in the industry? What has kept you fighting that good fight? I mean, obviously much more than just the recognition side of things, but what are some of the things that keep you around for the long haul here?
Well, I would be remiss to not mention that I have a great team. Like, as you were talking about, some people who are younger in the industry don't get afforded kind of these experiences. Like, I have been afforded that, and that's been really important to me. So I think I will say part of it definitely is I've had a great team. I've had a good manager that has kind of encouraged me to do big things. But in doing those big things, I think the thing that has kept me in the industry is kind of what I've been talking about in the lens of this stuff that we're doing is super impactful. And I think sometimes people don't realize that. But work is something that you do for the majority of your waking life. And if you can feel good and feel connected and feel happy while you're working, that is hugely impactful to people's lives. And I believe that the stuff that we're doing does help people feel more productive at work, does help people feel happy at work, helps them feel more connected. And so for me, I've always, kind of been a person that's like, I want to make a difference, which is such a funny saying. Like, what does that really mean? And there's so many ways we can make a difference, but I want to help people be happy. I want to help people feel productive. I want to leave my career going, I helped people live their best lives. And again, I think people might listen to me say that and go, that's really a stretch for this industry you're in. But I don't think it is a stretch, because I think what we're doing is so crucial to these lives and these people who are spending so much time working. We have to be happy while we're working. I mean, so anyways, that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question.
No, I love, it's the mission and vision driven approach, right? It's the idea that, as our industry has evolved, we've almost commoditized ourselves a little bit, because I would say pro AV and the AV industry was sort of its own nucleus of technologies and markets and things like that. Now we're in all these different markets, and we're in all these different workplaces and enterprise applications. And, no longer can we sit on the sidelines as our own little nuclear community. We have to be willing to have conversations and teach people how, hey, you can leverage this piece of technology not only for productivity, value, gains, cost savings, things like that, but to actually drive an impact in your community. You're now connecting people that were previously not connected. You're now empowering, a mother or a father who, had an hour and a half commute every day to be at home with their kids more, but also to reach international audiences and to be able to communicate with people across different geographies. And I think you're absolutely right. We miss that sometimes. We like to live in the world of text and specs, and sometimes we just miss that larger vision. And I'll tell you this, Andie, I think that's why I anticipate you'll be around for a good while in our industry, and I anticipate seeing you continue to grow, not only in your mission and vision, but getting promoted and being able to work with some of the biggest organizations, companies, and have some of the coolest conversations in the industry, because the mission and vision that you have is it's sticky. You can catch it like a cold, right? Whenever somebody talks to you, I'm already fired up. I don't know what I'm about to do. I'm gonna go do something crazy. I'll go serve and work at a charity or something like that. I don't know, but I'll tell you, it fires me up to hear stories like yours, because it's one of the reasons that keeps me doing what I'm doing. And I guarantee you there's folks in our audience and folks listening and watching right now who have that same idea and question and say, hey, I want to get in touch with Andie and I want to have her on my podcast, or I want to meet her. I want to learn more about her vision. Is LinkedIn the best way for people to reach out to talk to you?
Yeah, that's a great way. I'm very, I'm always checking LinkedIn. So if you message me there, I will probably respond to you.
Well, Andie, I'll tell you what, I'm about to go run through a brick wall real quick. And if we keep this thing going, I don't know, I might rip this mic off of its hinges or something like that, because your vision and your passion is contagious. It's exciting. And I 100% agree with the selection for 40 Under 40 this year. It's so incredible to see, even in the short time in the industry, how much impact you have. And for me, and I know a lot of different people in the industry, thank you for all the great work you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one more thing to say.
Oh, yes, of course.
Anyone who is young in this industry, keep sharing your ideas, even if they're different, because no one ever changed the world by saying the same thing that everyone else was saying. I always think about that to myself. I'm like, no one ever changed the world by saying the same thing that everyone else was already saying. That's all.
Man, and that's a heck of a way to land the plane right there. Andie Mace, 40 Under 40, awesome visionary, hype industry guru. I don't know. I'm going to give you all the superlatives I could think of. But Andie, thank you so much for coming on. Well, look, we've got to have you back on for sure, because the mental wellness and the mental fitness conversation, I think, is one that we've got to continue having as an industry. But thank you so much for coming on today, and we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you all for tuning in to Pro AV today. Be sure to tune in next time. Like, subscribe, do all the stuff, share, whatever you want. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.